Tom Bower, who has been working on the sequel to Revenge for some time, has secured a big money serialization deal with Rupert Murdoch's News UK, specifically the Times newspaper, but I believe it may also extend to the Sun newspaper too, to reveal the first bombshells from his book, which is expected to further damage the Madam of Montecito.
All right, so Revenge was released in July of 2022. Since then, based on polling and media coverage, how would you describe the trajectory of Harry and Meghan's reputations professionally and personally? It feels like they've taken quite a bit of a dive.
It certainly brings to light that whole theory of you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps straight out, but if you put a frog in cold water, it will slowly boil to death. And I think a lot of people, whilst myself hasn't actually been really shocked by the revelations because I was aware of, I'd say, most of them.
You write in the book, Harry must be nuts. This is one of the text messages his friends were sending around to each other after Meghan's first introduction to Harry's friends in 2017 during a shooting weekend at Sandringham.
I think personally, they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of in the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
How desperate was Meghan Markle to be famous? Well, apparently, according to Tom Bower's book, she basically spent seemingly all her money with the sole goal of intention of finding the right connections and being as famous as humanly possible.
And so he became hypersensitive and blamed the media for the crashes of his relationships, never thinking that they could have something to do with himself. So he's a very complicated, depressed, unintelligent man who is seeking a role and has got really nobody on whom he could rely, which is in the end where Meghan stepped in. I mean, a needy man met a woman who could help him with his needs.
Tom Bower just dropped an announcement that should have Meghan Markle watching the door. The investigative biographer who rocked them with Revenge in 2022 is back with Revenge 2. And he's claiming this time he has material they can't explain away.
But I do think that when you're mocked so publicly as they've been, their value begins to nosedive pretty quickly. And I don't think they're finding any more sources of income.
A major serialization deal is already lined up with News UK, The Times, and potentially The Sun, meaning the revelations won't land all at once. They'll hit in waves week after week. The first book landed when the Sussexes still had big contracts and big protectors. This sequel is arriving after the collapse, after Spotify, after the Netflix stumbles, after the sold-out branding that didn't hold. And that's the real shift. This isn't a story about a downturn anymore. It's an autopsy. Methodical, sourced, and built to leave nowhere to hide. If you don't know Tom Bower, here's why his name matters. He's not a vibes and rumors writer. He's built a career writing unauthorized biographies of some of the most powerful figures in Britain. And his approach is brutally simple. Find the people the subject doesn't want you to talk to, and then get them talking.
That is the picture Tom Bower paints in about the first 100 or so pages of his new book about Harry and Meghan. And so, guys, I'm going to just share with you a couple of the insights that I saw and some of the huge warning signs about who Meghan is and her intentions and how really this whole thing with her and Harry will absolutely end in tears.
That's how Revenge became a major bestseller. Dozens of sources, on-the-record testimony, and a trail of corroboration that didn't buckle under pressure. And the part that terrifies Meghan's camp most is this. Even with lawyers monitoring his every move, Bower hasn't been successfully sued, not once, because he works like a case builder. Documents, evidence, filings, records. For Revenge 2, he's been traveling, collecting, and building for years, and by his own account, the book is landing in early 2026, at a moment when Harry and Meghan have virtually zero control over the narrative that's coming. South Park didn't just mock them. It stamped a label on the brand that spread faster than any PR team could contain. In one database-style gag, Meghan's profile gets reduced to 4 words that hit like a punchline in a verdict. Sorority girl, actress, influencer, victim. And the reason that moment mattered isn't just that it was mean. It's that it was memetic. Once an idea becomes a meme, it stops being something you can clarify. It becomes something the public repeats for you. Reports say Meghan's team tried to shut the episode down before it aired, but satire is protected speech, and South Park came with lawyers too. Bauer, watching this in real time, isn't just tracking headlines. He's tracking cultural momentum. Because satire only works when it reflects what people already suspect. South Park didn't invent the doubts, it animated them. And now Bauer is digging into whether any of those suspicions are grounded in something more than internet noise. Here's where Revenge 2 starts to sound genuinely dangerous. The book reportedly goes straight into the inconsistencies people have been arguing about for years, especially around pregnancy photos and timelines. Same-day images where the bump appears different sizes, clips where it seems to shift or fold, public appearances that critics say don't line up with the narrative. And now the legal context may be different. Bauer has said there were details he avoided the first time because of British privacy constraints. But that calculus changes if you're publishing under American standards and building the file with documentation over multiple years. The point isn't that he's making a single explosive claim. It's that he's assembling a portfolio of contradictions, one by one, and letting the weight of the record do the damage. This is the Bauer advantage. He doesn't win by shouting accusations. He wins by documenting contradictions. Publishers and editors can panic about tone, bias, and blowback. But paperwork doesn't care. Records create trails. Dates create timelines. Public documents don't need permission to be persuasive. And that's why he becomes so difficult to sue. Instead of telling you what to think, he stacks verifiable pieces and lets the audience connect the dots. That method, cold, procedural, evidence first, is exactly what turns gossip into something far more durable. One of the quieter threads Bauer is rumored to be investigating is also one of the most consequential in Hollywood: age. Official records say Meghan was born in 1981. But online researchers point to older listings in early interviews, databases, and casting records that sometimes show different birth years. And the reason it matters isn't petty, it's practical. In entertainment, being 28 versus 35 can change what rooms you're invited into, which roles you're seen for, and how fast your window feels like it's closing. If Bauer can access older enrollment documents, agency records, or early casting paperwork, materials most people never see, he doesn't need to declare a truth. He only needs to show inconsistencies and ask why they exist, because discrepancies, especially repeated ones, are where his stories begin. Now we get to the access question, the one people have been circling since the beginning. Bauer's longtime focus on Soho House isn't just about a trendy club. It's about what membership represents: curated doors, expensive proximity, and social mobility that most modest TV money can't easily buy. So his question becomes blunt. How does a struggling actress gain repeated entry into some of the most exclusive private networks on the planet? And why do certain connections, particularly figures inside the membership machine, seem to track her movements across cities? When your story depends on who opened which door, the gatekeepers become the plot. Then come the yacht-era allegations, images and whispers that have floated around for years, some misidentified, some contested, but persistent enough that Bauer treats them like a pattern worth mapping, not a rumor worth repeating. The financial logic is what keeps the question alive. A solid TV salary can explain comfort, but it doesn't automatically explain private jets, luxury yacht circles, or high-cost lifestyles that appear to outpace the known income stream. So Bauer's angle isn't "here's a scandal," it's "who financed the access?" Because if the lifestyle shows up before the public story catches up, the gap between the two becomes the mystery. Here's a detail Bauer would never ignore: selective silence. The claim is that Meghan has pursued legal action aggressively in other situations. Yet around certain photos and allegations, there's been far less pushback, and in an investigative frame, that contrast becomes its own signal. Silence can be strategic, silence can be legal, silence can be nothing. But when it's inconsistent, when some stories get immediate threats and others don't, Bauer treats that difference like a lead, not a footnote. Especially if the people who were there back then, party circles, insiders, staff, are now aging out of NDAs and becoming easier to approach. Bauer isn't only revisiting old controversies, he's also documenting modern failures as they happen, while the receipts still exist. The American Riviera Orchard rollout is framed like a perfect PR win. Headlines about product selling out, media echoing the story, instant success. But the narrative flips when inventory data surfaces, claims of massive unsold stock, perishable goods sitting for years, and a strategy that looks less like demand and more like manufactured scarcity. That's the kind of story Bauer loves because it's measurable. Cart numbers, warehouse totals, timelines of reorders, and the gap between what the public was told and what the numbers suggest. If Revenge 2 is built like his past work, it won't rely on outrage. It'll rely on the cold weight of documentation and the humiliating simplicity of math. The staff exodus isn't just gossip in this framing, it's a timer. Bauer's argument is that what looks like normal turnover becomes meaningful when it's repeated, when it clusters, and when it leaves behind a trail of burned relationships. Every resignation is a potential witness. Every discarded ally is a future source. And every NDA has a clock, expiration dates, enforceability limits, moments when people decide the risk is worth it. So the story becomes less about one employee leaving and more about a pattern: bridges burned, opportunities fumbled, blame outsourced. While Bauer quietly collects names, timelines, and accounts until enough of them can talk. The closing argument is simple. Bauer's credibility is rising as theirs collapses, poll numbers falling, deals drying up, projects flopping, inventory sitting, charity scrutiny mounting. And into that moment comes a sequel designed not just to revisit what they did, but to argue who they were, with tax documents, filings, records, and a serialization strategy that keeps the story alive week after week. That's why the countdown feels real. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's scheduled. The machine is already in motion, writing, investigating, documenting, while the people at the center of it have fewer and fewer ways to steer the narrative. And if Bauer's model holds, he won't need to win the argument. He'll just need to publish the paper trail and let the damage accumulate, one drop at a time.